A percentile is where does the brain volume rank relative to people with your same age and gender, right? So that's what these numbers represent. Let's do some examples here really quickly. So if you see a number here hovering around 50, let's say it's 50th percentile, I'm highlighting here some examples. Basically what that means is that that brain region is highly average or common. It's very typical. It's very representative of the population at large for people with your age and your gender, right? So if in my case, you know, at this time I was 36, almost 36 years old when I did this scan. So this is for a 35, 36-year-old male. These numbers are hovering around the highly prototypical average common brain volume, right? Right. So that's what 50th percentile means. If we're looking at something like 80th percentile, right, these are kind of hovering close to that. What that means is that the volume is greater than 80% of the population with that age and the gender. So one way to interpret that is that it is on the larger end, but it's still considered normal, right? If you see something like 20th percentile or something hovering around that, right? What that means is that the volume is only greater than 20% of the population in that age range and gender. So another way to say that is it's on the smaller end, but it's still considered normal, right? People vary. There's normal variation in volumes that is just, it's just part of, you know, some people have smaller brain structures by default, other people will have larger brain structures, and there's a normal range for that kind of stuff. Now, when we're talking about clinically abnormal levels, just basic conventions, anything below 5th percentile would be considered clinically abnormal for atrophy, right? So it would be considered like a clinically atrophied region. It's unusually small. So now we're going into these extremes where you're starting to think more in clinical terms. Anything above 95th percentile would be clinically abnormal for enlargement, right? So above 95th or something hovering around that, you're thinking enlarged or swollen, unusually large, essentially. And you want to make sure that, you know, when you're reading this, you don't fall for the color coding. You want to read the numbers or have someone read the numbers if you're looking for patterns or if your practitioner is looking for patterns. Sometimes the color coding scheme is kind of confusing because you'll have things like this where it's like a 5th percentile, it's right at the cutoff and it's not highlighted, and then you could be easily persuaded to not look at that. But there are a lot of border numbers in this report. Like here, for example, the inferior frontal would be considered sort of, you know, on the border, and I would be looking at that. And if anything like 88th, 90, you know, so below 95th but hovering, those are relevant numbers. So yeah, you don't just want to base it off the coloring scheme system.